The year was 2347. Humans had spread across the stars like seeds in the wind. 47 star systems now belonged to them. Small cities on distant planets, mining stations on frozen moons, research labs floating in space. It took 300 years, but humanity had finally left Earth behind and built a new home among the stars. They thought they were alone. They were wrong. The Jarik Collective had been watching. For 50 years, they studied every human world from the shadows. They sent invisible probes. They intercepted communications. They analyzed battle strategies and political systems. The Jarik were ancient, powerful, and patient. Their empire covered 10,000 worlds across multiple galaxies. They had conquered hundreds of species before. Humans would be no different. Supreme Commander Thielix stood before the holographic display in his command ship. His 6 eyes studied the human star systems like a predator watching prey. Everything was ready. Every calculation complete. Every variable accounted for. The attack began during the Festival of Unity. Humans across all their worlds were celebrating together. Military personnel took leave. Families gathered. Ships docked in ports. The timing was perfect. In the first hour, the Jarik disabled every orbital defense platform around Earth. The massive cannons that protected the home world went dark. Communication arrays stopped working. Emergency systems failed. In the second hour, they destroyed the colonial fleet. Human warships gathered at rally points across 6 sectors, preparing for routine patrols. The Jarik knew exactly where they would be. Massive energy weapons fired from hidden positions. Within minutes, thousands of ships became floating wreckage. Escape pods drifted through space, their distress signals going nowhere. In the third hour, electromagnetic pulse weapons swept across human colonies. Technology died. Lights went out. Computers crashed. Communication devices turned into useless metal. Hospitals lost power. Cities went dark. The only light came from fires. By the end of the first day, Jarik soldiers walked the streets of New Shanghai on Mars. By the end of the second day, they controlled the mining stations of the Kepler Belt. By the end of the third day, every major human world belonged to the Jarik Collective. Supreme Commander Thielix addressed the Collective Council with pride in his voice. The hologram showed his tall figure, his silver armor gleaming. Behind him, images of conquered human cities played on screens. The humans are neutralized. Our analysis was correct. They are a young species, only 300 years in space. Their military tactics are predictable. Their supply chains are weak. When facing overwhelming force, they surrender. This conquest required minimal resources. The council members approved. Some suggested celebrations. Others talked about colonizing human worlds. Thielix continued his report. We have also deployed biological weapons in Earth's atmosphere. The home world is now uninhabitable for humans. This ensures they cannot regroup there. Their government has fled aboard a carrier called the Indomitable. They broadcast unconditional surrender this morning. Perfect victory. The Jarik had studied everything. Military strength, economic systems, political structures, population centers, resource locations. Everything was documented, analyzed, and countered. Except one thing. The Jarik had examined human wars throughout history. They saw battles won and lost. They recorded strategies and tactics. But they never asked why humans kept fighting even when losing. They studied human psychology, measuring logic and emotion. But they dismissed what they called irrational behavior as statistical noise, numbers that did not fit their models. They never asked the most important question. What happens when humans have nothing left to lose? 2 weeks after the invasion, reports started coming in. Small incidents, minor problems, nothing concerning. A patrol went missing on Mars. Probably got lost. A supply depot exploded on Europa. Equipment malfunction. Communication relay destroyed on Titan. Accident. Thielix reviewed the reports with barely a glance. Occupations always had small resistance at first. It would fade. Humans would accept their new reality. They always did. Every species eventually did. On a burned colony world called Haven, smoke still rose from destroyed buildings. Jarik soldiers patrolled empty streets. Most humans had evacuated before the attack. But not all. In the ruins of what used to be a school, a lone human survivor climbed through the wreckage. Her clothes were torn. Her face was dirty. Her hands were bloody from digging through debris. She found a can of spray paint in a supply closet. She walked to the largest remaining wall. It faced the main road where Jarek patrols passed every hour. With slow, careful movements, she wrote words in large letters. The paint dripped down the concrete, but the message was clear. They can kill us. They cannot make us quit. She stepped back and looked at her work. Then she picked up a piece of metal pipe from the rubble and walked toward the sound of the next patrol. She did not plan to survive the day, but she planned to make them remember it. Across human space, in dark corners and hidden places, similar scenes played out. Humans who should have given up started fighting back. Not armies, not organized forces, just people who refused to accept defeat. The Jarek had planned everything. They had superior numbers, better technology, overwhelming force, perfect strategy, but they forgot about the humans. 6 months had passed since the invasion. On the surface, everything looked stable. Jarek forces controlled every major human city. Their ships patrolled the space lanes. Their governors issued laws. The occupation appeared complete. But something was wrong. What the Jarek classified as minor resistance cells were actually thousands of independent groups. They had no central command, no unified strategy, no formal organization. This confused the Jarek military analysts. How could you fight an enemy with no leadership? The answer was simple. You could not. On the mining colony of Kepler 442b, 3 engineers named Marcus, Liu, and Sarah met in an abandoned tunnel. Before the war, they operated drilling equipment. Now they built bombs. They studied Jarek patrol patterns for weeks. They knew exactly when the supply convoy would pass through the canyon. The explosion destroyed 12 transport vehicles. The Jarek immediately sent investigation teams. They found no evidence, no fingerprints, no DNA, nothing to track. The 3 engineers had already returned to their assigned work posts, acting like nothing happened. On the agricultural world of New Vermont, a farming family reprogrammed their harvesting drones. The machines were designed to gather crops. With simple modifications, they could carry explosives. At midnight, 50 drones flew toward the Zurich military base. Most got shot down, but 10 made it through. The base burned for 3 days. On occupied Earth, in the zones contaminated by Jarek biological weapons, resistance fighters moved through the ruins. The invaders declared these areas unsurvivable. They were wrong. Humans adapted. Black market radiation treatments. Protective gear cobbled together from salvaged materials. Sheer stubbornness. The ghosts in the radioactive zone struck at Jarek forces, then vanished into places their enemies would not follow. Industrial mining lasers became artillery. Cargo haulers became bombers. Maintenance robots became assault units. Humans weaponized everything the Jarek overlooked. If it could be modified, they modified it. If it could explode, they made it explode. If it could hurt the enemy, they used it. Supreme Commander Thalek stared at the reports with growing confusion. The numbers made no sense. Every time his forces eliminated a resistance cell, more appeared. Sometimes 3, sometimes 5. Like cutting off one head of a creature and watching 3 more grow back. He called a meeting with his tactical advisors. The holographic display showed incident reports from across human space. Red markers everywhere. Hundreds of attacks. Thousands of casualties. Explain this. We destroyed their military. We control their worlds. Why do they continue fighting? A junior analyst spoke carefully. Commander, their behavior does not match our psychological models. When we corner them, they attack instead of surrender. When we outnumber them, they fight anyway. When we destroy their equipment, they improvise new weapons. They fight from positions with no escape routes. It is illogical. Thalix felt something he had never experienced before. Not quite fear, but close. These humans were not following the rules. Every other species eventually accepted reality. They calculated odds. They chose survival. But humans seemed to operate on different principles. The resistance grew more sophisticated. A teenage hacker named Kira Chen sat in a hidden bunker on Mars, her fingers flying across a salvaged computer terminal. She had been working on this code for 3 months. It exploited a weakness in Jarek communication protocols that she discovered by analyzing captured equipment. When she pressed enter, the virus spread through enemy networks like fire through dry grass. Jarek drones started attacking their own forces. Automated turrets turned on their operators. The chaos lasted only 10 minutes before they shut down their systems. But in those 10 minutes, resistance fighters struck 6 bases simultaneously. The coordination amazed even the humans. No one had ordered those attacks. Different groups simply saw the opportunity and acted, like separate instruments playing the same song without a conductor. Then came the night of 12 worlds. Resistance cells across 12 different planets coordinated their largest operation yet. They did not use radio. They did not use quantum communications. They used an ancient Earth method the Jarek never bothered to monitor. Morse code, transmitted through seemingly random power fluctuations in electrical grids, simple, invisible, effective. At exactly the same moment, in 12 different star systems, humans struck Jarek supply depots. The attacks were not sophisticated, just explosives and determination, but the targets were perfect. Food supplies, ammunition, fuel, spare parts, medical equipment. Everything the occupation forces needed. The Jarek logistics network collapsed. Ships could not refuel. Soldiers went hungry. Weapons ran out of ammunition. Wounded forces had no medicine. The mighty war machine started breaking down. That same night, the carrier Indomitable broke its silence. Admiral Sarah Chen appeared on every screen, every monitor, every working display across human space. Her face was older now, tired, but her eyes burned with purpose. To every human still breathing, she said. Her voice was calm but strong. 6 months ago, we broadcast surrender. It was a lie. We needed time. Time to scatter. Time to hide. Time to organize. Time to learn. The Jarek thought they won. They were wrong. She paused, letting her words sink in. We did not surrender. We bought time. Now we fight back. Every factory worker, every farmer, every miner, every parent, every child old enough to hold a wrench. You are the resistance. You are the warriors. You are hope. Fight with whatever you have. Fight wherever you are. Fight until they leave or until we are all dead. But never stop fighting. The transmission ended. But the message spread like wildfire. Across every occupied world, humans heard it. Some cried. Some laughed. Some just nodded and picked up whatever weapon they could find. The collective council summoned Thielix. They were not happy. The holographic chamber crackled with angry voices. This was supposed to be a simple occupation. Minimal resources. Maximum return. Instead, they were hemorrhaging troops and supplies. One council member spoke with cold fury. You assured us these humans were defeated. You said they would accept occupation. You claimed victory. Yet we must garrison every world with overwhelming force. Our soldiers report psychological trauma. Our resources drain daily. Explain. Thielix had no good answer. He displayed his data, the strategic analysis, the psychological profiles, the military assessment. Everything pointed to human defeat. According to every metric they had, the humans should have given up. His voice was quiet when he finally spoke. We destroyed their military. We conquered their worlds. We eliminated their infrastructure. By every strategic metric, we have won, yet they continue fighting. I do not understand what drives them. Fear does not stop them. Pain does not deter them. Death does not frighten them. They fight when they should flee. They attack when they should hide. They refuse to acknowledge defeat. The council chamber fell silent. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Jarek collective faced an enemy they could not comprehend. An enemy who would not follow the rules of war. An enemy who valued something more than survival. The humans had nothing left to lose, and that made them the most dangerous force in the galaxy. 1 year into the occupation, the Jarek Empire found itself in a situation they had never faced before. A quagmire, a war that refused to end, an enemy that refused to die. Every human world required massive garrisons. Soldiers who were supposed to be conquering new territories were instead trapped holding ground they thought they had already won. Supply lines stretched thin. Resources drained. Morale crumbled. Jarek combat algorithms could not predict human behavior. When outnumbered 10-1, humans attacked. When surrounded, they fought harder. When all hope seemed lost, they found new ways to resist. Their tactical computer systems kept malfunctioning. Not from technical problems, from trying to process the impossible. Soldiers reported psychological trauma. They described humans who kept fighting despite mortal wounds, children who threw rocks at armored vehicles, elderly civilians who sabotaged equipment with their bare hands. The medical term was combat fatigue. The real problem was fighting an enemy that should be dead but kept advancing. On the colony world of New Hope, a captured Jarek officer sat in an abandoned building that the Resistance used as a temporary holding facility. They did not torture him. They did not need to. What he witnessed was enough. An old woman entered the room. She looked like someone's grandmother. Gray hair, wrinkled face, kind eyes. She carried a bag over her shoulder. The officer watched as she opened the bag and began assembling something. Wires, explosives, a timer. Her movements were practiced, calm. She could have been knitting a sweater. Why? The officer finally asked. You are old. You could live out your remaining years in peace. Why fight? She looked at him with those kind eyes. Her voice was gentle. You took my planet. You killed my children. You destroyed my home. I am old, yes. I will die soon anyway. But I choose how I die, and I choose to take as many of you with me as I can. She finished assembling the device and placed it carefully in her bag. Then she stood and smiled at him. It was not a cruel smile. Just sad. Not from fanaticism. Not from madness. From calculated rage. You believe survival is the highest goal. For you, losing means death. For us, surviving without freedom is worse than death. That is why you cannot win. You took our peace. Now I take yours, she walked out. The officer heard an explosion 3 hours later from the direction of the hospital the Jarek had converted into a command center. The Resistance evolved with terrifying speed. They studied captured Jarek weapons and reverse-engineered the technology. Human engineers created hybrid devices combining their own tools with alien components. A mining laser powered by a Jarek energy cell. A farming drone with enemy shield generators. A construction robot equipped with plasma cannons. On the mining colony Kepler 442b, Resistance fighters developed zero-gravity combat techniques. The Zarek had gravity generators. Humans did not need them. They learned to fight in 3 dimensions using the weightless environment as a weapon. They attacked from above, below, and all sides. The enemy soldiers used to ground-based warfare died confused. Kira Chen, now 19 years old, led cyber warfare operations from a hidden base on Titan. She was not just hacking anymore. She was conducting digital warfare at a scale the Jarek had never imagined. She turned their automated defenses into traps. She corrupted their supply management systems. She made their own technology betray them. Her most brilliant hack came during a major Jarek offensive. 3 battle fleets were attacking Resistance positions on Mars. Kira infiltrated their navigation systems and changed a single number, a decimal point. The fleets thought they were light years away from each other. In reality, they were on a collision course. The resulting crash destroyed 60% of the attacking force before anyone realized what happened. Supreme Commander Thylix stood alone in his command chamber. The lights were dimmed. The holographic displays showed nothing but bad news. He had a choice to make. A terrible choice. The collective council was losing patience. They wanted results. They wanted this problem solved. Thylix proposed extreme measures. Orbital bombardment of Resistance strongholds. Nuclear strikes on civilian population centers. Biological weapons more deadly than anything they had used before. The council refused. They needed human worlds intact. They wanted colonies to exploit. Destroying the prize to win the game made no sense. But holding the prize without destroying it seemed impossible. They were trapped, unable to win without destroying what they came to conquer. Unable to maintain occupation without bleeding resources. The perfect strategy had become a perfect nightmare. Meanwhile, aboard the carrier Indomitable, Admiral Sarah Chen studied intelligence reports with her senior staff. Her daughter Kira had sent something interesting. A location, coordinates, a target, the Nexus Core, the heart of the Jarek Collective, a massive megastructure floating in deep space that coordinated their entire empire, every fleet, every garrison, every occupied world, all controlled from this single point. It was the most heavily defended location in Jarek space. 10,000 warships surrounded it. Automated defense platforms numbered in the millions. Energy shields strong enough to withstand supernova blasts. Getting close was impossible. Getting inside was suicide. Destroying it was a fantasy. Admiral Chen looked at the tactical display for a long time. Her officers waited. They knew that look. She was planning something crazy. Finally, she spoke. The Jarek strength is also their weakness.
They achieve perfection through total coordination.
Every ship follows the plan. Every soldier obeys the orders. Every system connects to the central command. She pointed at the Nexus core on the display. Single point of failure. Cut the head off the snake and the body dies. Her tactical officer shook his head. Admiral, we have maybe 200 ships. Most of them are civilian vessels with makeshift weapons, mining barges, cargo haulers, passenger transports. We cannot fight 10,000 warships. Admiral Chen smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone about to do something impossible. We do not need to fight them. We just need to distract them long enough for Kira and her team to get inside. The Jarek have spent a year learning what humans can do. Time to teach them a new lesson. What lesson? Someone asked. That we refuse to lose. Gather every ship, every pilot, every weapon, every brave fool who wants to strike back. We are going to attack the Nexus core. The room erupted in protests. Impossible. Suicide. Madness. Every voice said the same thing in different words. It could not be done. Admiral Chen stood and faced them. Her voice cut through the noise. The Jarek planned everything. They studied us for 50 years. They predicted our moves. They countered our strategies. They calculated victory down to the decimal point. But they forgot one thing. They forgot about humans who refuse to accept reality. Humans who fight impossible battles. Humans who win by not knowing when to quit. She looked each officer in the eye. They planned everything except the one thing that matters most. Us. 18 months after the invasion, the impossible plan began. The human fleet gathered at the edge of Jarek space. It was not a military fleet. It was a collection of whatever still flew. Mining ships with drilling lasers welded to their hulls. Cargo vessels carrying homemade missiles. Passenger liners converted into rams. Every craft looked different. Every weapon was improvised. Every crew was made up of volunteers who knew they probably would not survive. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable. The carrier had seen better days. Hull breaches patched with scrap metal. Energy shields running at 60%. Half the weapon systems offline. But it still flew. That was enough. Her strategy violated every principle of military doctrine. A frontal assault with inferior forces against overwhelming numbers. Suicide by any definition. But the plan depended on the Jarek seeing exactly that. A desperate, disorganized attack. Exactly what you would expect from defeated humans making one last stand. The Jarek tactical computers calculated a probability of human defeat at 99.8%. The numbers were clear. The outcome certain. The Jarek fleet committed forces accordingly. That was the first mistake. While the main fleet approached in a chaotic swarm, a small stealth vessel drifted through the debris field surrounding the Nexus core. It was a converted garbage scow, old, slow, falling apart. The Jarek sensors marked it as floating wreckage and ignored it. That was the second mistake. Inside the garbage scow, Kira Chen and her team prepared. 5 hackers, 2 engineers, 1 medic, 8 people to infiltrate the most secure facility in the galaxy. The odds were impossible. They went anyway. The space battle began with a fury that surprised even the humans. Ships charged forward in seemingly random patterns. Some went left, some went right, some dove down, some climbed up. There was no formation, no coordination. Just individual crews fighting their own battles. The Jarek fleet tried to respond with their usual precision. Tactical computers analyzed the chaos and calculated optimal countermoves. But the numbers kept changing. Every human ship acted independently. What worked against one did not work against another. It was like fighting 200 different enemies at once. A mining barge rammed a destroyer, using its reinforced hull as a weapon. A cargo hauler released thousands of metal containers that acted like massive shotgun pellets. A passenger liner flew straight at a battleship, all guns firing, no attempt to dodge. It exploded in a fireball that took 3 Jarek vessels with it. The humans did not fight like an organized military. They fought like individuals who happened to share the same goal. Some used tactics. Some used luck. Some just aimed at the biggest target and kept shooting until they died. The Jarek computers could not predict any of it. Admiral Chen watched the battle from her command chair. The Indomitable shook under enemy fire. Sparks flew from damaged consoles. Smoke filled the air. Alarms screamed everywhere. She ignored all of it. Status report. Her voice was calm despite the chaos. Shields at 20%. Weapons at 40%. Hull breaches on decks 5 through 7. We lost contact with engineering and Kira? Still transmitting. They are inside, the Admiral nodded. Then we keep fighting. Full power to forward shields. Target that flagship and ram it if we have to. Admiral, that will destroy us. She smiled. Then it will be a good death. Once more onto the breach, dear friends. Once more. Inside the Nexus core, Kira's team moved through corridors filled with alien technology. They had practiced this infiltration 1,000 times in simulations. Reality was different. The walls seemed to breathe. The air tasted like metal and electricity. Strange sounds echoed from every direction. They used captured Jarik biosignatures to bypass security. 18 months of stolen access codes. Careful planning. Perfect timing. Everything worked. Until they reached the central mainframe. The access point was biologically locked. It required Jarik neural patterns. Not just a code or password. Actual brain chemistry. No human could interface with it. Kira stared at the interface. 18 months of planning. Thousands of lives being spent in the space battle above. Everything depended on accessing this system. And they could not do it. The medic, Dr. Ramos, stepped forward. He was looking at something in his medical kit. A sample he had taken from a dead Jarik soldier months ago. Neural tissue preserved in a stasis field. There might be a way. His voice was quiet. I can splice this tissue into your nervous system. Create a temporary bridge. You could interface with their system. What are the risks? Dr. Ramos did not lie. Brain damage, paralysis, death, probably death. The alien tissue will try to integrate with your neurons. Your immune system will fight it. The pain will be extreme. Kira thought about her mother fighting in space above them. She thought about every human who had died in the last 18 months. She thought about the grandmother with the bomb. She thought about all the people who refused to quit. Do it. The surgery took 12 minutes. It felt like 12 hours. Dr. Ramos worked with hands that did not shake despite the pressure. The alien tissue connected to Kira's nervous system. The integration was imperfect, painful, but it worked. Kira screamed once. Then she forced herself to focus. Her hands moved to the interface. Alien thoughts tried to flood her mind. She pushed them away. This was human determination meeting alien technology. Stubborn will against biological programming. The system accepted her. She was in. The virus she uploaded was not designed to destroy. It was designed to corrupt. She called it human factor. It introduced randomness into every Jarik system. Chaos algorithms, emotional responses, unpredictable behavior. Everything that made humans impossible to defeat, coded into software. The effect was immediate. Jarik ships received contradictory orders. Some were told to advance, others to retreat, some to fire on coordinates that were actually friendly positions. Drones froze in mid-flight. Automated defenses shut down. The perfect coordination that made the Jarik powerful became total paralysis. In the space battle, Admiral Chen watched as enemy ships suddenly stopped moving in formation. They drifted, collided, fired at each other. The overwhelming force became a confused mess. She did not understand what caused it. She did not need to. She saw the opportunity, all ships. Her voice rang across every human vessel. This is our moment. Attack, attack everything. Show them what happens when you forget about humans. The human fleet surged forward. They were still outnumbered, still outgunned. But now the playing field was chaos. And humans were very good at chaos. The Jarik fleet retreated. Not from defeat. From confusion. They needed time to understand what happened. Time to regroup. Time to fix their systems. Admiral Chen knew they had hours at best. Maybe less. She gave the final order. All ships pursue. Do not let them recover. Press the advantage. This is our only chance. Her tactical officer looked at her with concern. Admiral, you are wounded. She looked down. Blood soaked her uniform. She had not noticed. Shrapnel from an explosion. She felt cold. Tired. Her vision blurred at the edges. Does not matter. Keep fighting until they leave or we are all dead. Those were her last words. Admiral Sarah Chen died on the bridge of the Indomitable. But her order lived on. Every human ship heard it. Every crew obeyed it. They pursued the enemy fleet. Against impossible odds. With determination that defied logic. fighting until the very end, because that was what humans did. The final 48 hours of the war would be remembered forever. With the Nexus core compromised, the Jarek Empire fractured. Their perfect coordination was gone. Ships operated independently. Commanders made their own decisions. Some tried to hold their positions. Others retreated. A few even surrendered. The mighty empire that conquered 10,000 worlds broke apart like glass. On every occupied human world, the resistance sensed victory. They emerged from hiding places with renewed strength. Factories that had been sabotaged for months suddenly exploded. Communication arrays went offline. Supply depots burned. The systematic resistance became an avalanche. On Earth, resistance fighters climbed out of the radioactive zones. They were thin, scarred. Some were dying from radiation exposure, but they could still hold weapons. They retook New York in 6 hours.
Shanghai in 8.
London in 12. The Jarek forces, without central command, could not organize a defense. Supreme Commander Thiel Ix watched his empire collapse in real time. The holographic displays showed red markers spreading across every sector. Defeat after defeat, retreat after retreat, everything falling apart. The collective council assembled in emergency session. They were panicking. These ancient beings who had ruled for millennia suddenly faced something they never imagined. Total failure. One council member spoke with anger. You assured us victory. You said they were defeated. You claimed they would accept occupation. Now our empire burns. Our soldiers die. Our reputation crumbles. Explain this disaster. Thielix had no more excuses, no more analysis, no more data. He spoke the simple truth. We studied their technology. We analyzed their tactics. We understood their politics. We planned for every possibility, but we never studied their spirit. We never understood what drives them. They do not fight to win. They fight because they cannot do otherwise. Fear does not stop them. Pain does not slow them. Death does not frighten them. They fight when logic says to flee. They attack when reason says to hide. They refuse to acknowledge defeat even when every metric shows they have lost. He paused. His voice grew quieter. We did not lose a war. We lost to an idea, the idea that freedom matters more than survival. That chaos can defeat order. That the most dangerous opponent is not the one with the best plan, but the one with nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. We planned everything. We accounted for every variable, except the one that mattered most. What it means to be human. The council had no response. They voted to sue for peace. The proud Jarek collective, conquerors of galaxies, formally requested negotiations with the humans they thought they had defeated. The human fleet converged on Earth. What remained of the fleet? 200 ships became 70. 70 became 40, but those 40 were enough. They arrived as liberators. Captain Kira Chen commanded the operation from the bridge of the Indomitable. The carrier had survived, barely. Half the crew was dead. The other half was wounded. The ship itself held together through repairs and hope. But it still flew. Kira was recovering from the surgery. The alien neural tissue had been removed. Dr. Ramos said she would live. The scars would be permanent. So would the nightmares, but she would live. A Jarek envoy arrived in a small diplomatic vessel. He expected negotiations, treaties, discussions of terms. He found something different. Captain Chen met him in the conference room. She did not sit. She stood. Behind her, images of destroyed human cities played on screens. Billions dead, worlds burned, children orphaned, families destroyed. The envoy spoke carefully. We come seeking peaceful resolution. Terms that are acceptable to both sides. A cessation of hostilities. Perhaps reparations could be discussed. Kira cut him off. Her voice was ice. You do not get to negotiate. You get to leave. Complete withdrawal from all human space within 30 days. Full reparations paid over 10 years. And one more thing. You tell every species in the galaxy what you learned here. The envoy hesitated. What did we learn? Never forget about the humans. The treaty was signed that day. The Jarek forces began withdrawing. It would take months for every garrison to leave. Years for the reparations to be paid. Decades for the scars to heal. Human worlds started rebuilding. Cities rose from ruins. Farms grew crops again. Families reunited. The work was hard. The losses were terrible. 4 billion humans had died in the war. But those who survived were stronger, united, forever changed. Earth healed slowly. The biological weapons had damaged the atmosphere badly, but human scientists worked to fix it. They said it would take 50 years. Maybe longer, but humans were patient when they needed to be. And they never gave up. The war changed humanity's place in the galaxy. Before they were a young species, unproven, weak. Now they were something else, respected, feared, known. News of the human victory spread. Other species watched carefully. Some sent congratulations. Others sent trade agreements. All of them took note. The Jarik Collective never recovered their reputation. They remained powerful, but the legend of their invincibility died. They became a cautionary tale. A story other civilizations told their young. The mighty empire that forgot about the humans. 50 years later, in a quiet university on the rebuilt Mars colony, an elderly Jarik historian gave lectures about the war. Thalix had survived the conflict. He spent his remaining years studying what had happened. Trying to understand, a young Jarik student raised her hand during class. "Professor, I do not understand. How did we lose? We had superior numbers, better technology, perfect planning. The statistics all showed we would win." Thalix smiled sadly. He had answered this question many times, but he never grew tired of it, because the answer was important, essential, something every species needed to understand. We had everything except what mattered. We assumed all intelligent species value survival above all else. We thought losing meant death, and death meant surrender. We were wrong. He gestured to images of the war on the display. For humans, surviving without freedom is worse than death. They would rather die fighting than live in chains. That is not logic. That is not rational behavior. That is something deeper, something we never accounted for in our calculations. Spirit, determination, stubbornness, call it what you will. It cannot be measured, cannot be predicted, cannot be defeated. He looked at his students. We planned everything. We studied their technology, their tactics, their history. We knew how many ships they had, how many soldiers, how much ammunition. We calculated every variable, except the most important one. What drives them? What makes them refuse to quit even when every logical analysis says they should? We planned for everything except what it means to be human. Another student asked, "Will we ever try to conquer them again?" Thalix shook his head firmly. "No, never. That is the final lesson. You can defeat human technology. You can destroy human cities. You can kill human soldiers. But you cannot break human spirit. And any war you cannot win is a war you should never start." On Earth, in the center of rebuilt New York, a monument stood tall. Black stone carved with names, 4 billion names, every human who died in the war. It took a full day to read them all aloud. At the base of the monument, words were carved in letters that could be seen from orbit. They claimed victory. They planned everything. They forgot about us. They will remember. Every year on the anniversary of the liberation, humans gathered at monuments like this across every world. They spoke the names. They told the stories. They remembered the sacrifice, and they promised. To themselves, to their children, to the galaxy. Never again would anyone forget about the humans. Never again would anyone think humanity could be conquered. Never again would anyone mistake human patience for weakness. Never again would anyone believe that having better plans, better weapons, better technology meant certain victory, because the Jarik had learned the hard way. They planned everything. They studied every variable. They calculated every outcome. They prepared for every possibility, but they forgot about the humans, and that was the one mistake you could never afford to make.